Fáilte go music at Maddens with me, Lynette Fay. We're coming to you from the snug upstairs here in the pub, widely referred to as Belfast's home of traditional music. And we make it our home here every week as well. You can watch on YouTube. Thanks for listening on Spotify and Apple. Please do leave a review and subscribe as well. Spread the word. Tell your friends. This week I have fiddle concertina player and singer Niamh Ní Charra from Killarney in County Kerry in the snug upstairs in Maddens. Niamh has released 4 albums. She's toured as a soloist with Riverdance. She's also a professional archivist, currently project manager and project archivist for Conwy na Gaeilge and the Mary Robinson collections in the University of Galway. And she's also a founding member of the volunteer campaign group Fair Play. Niamh, tá sé galanta tú a gael gur maigad a sclacu leis an carú haftan seo.
Agus có jazzman seo freisin like.
Great.
Agus an siomer seo chochiún. I have room to spread my arms. It's great.
And Rud is anu is ainty.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a real special treat. That's how we entice people to do this. So Niamh, like I've just read basically part of your bio there, and like you
there's lots going on.
You pack it in, girl. You pack it in. There's an awful lot going on there, and it seems like the music is the music is there, but it's not everything that you do. And I just, I think it's lovely the way the archives and the music must complement each other. But the music very much so came first. You picked up the concertina at 4.
I asked Santa Claus for uilleann pipes, actually. And Santa Claus is a very wise man. And Santa Claus said, no fucking way. And I got a concertina. So yeah, I was young. Concertina.
So there's a lesson there.
There's a lesson there. I think maybe the short stature of me at the time that they reckoned... Santa reckoned that this octopus of an instrument just wasn't going to work for me, But yeah, I started concertina and the fiddle shortly after, actually. And I've played all my life. We won't do the maths on that one, but yeah. Yeah,
fantastic. And then you're a singer as well. Were you always singing?
Under duress, that one I have to admit. And part of it was I would be touring, and I toured, as you mentioned, with Riverdance for a good few years. And when I came back from Riverdance, I wanted to hit the ground running, and so I set up my own band, and I started, I recorded my first album kind of within a year of coming back. But you know yourself, you're touring and you're trying to kind of juggle everything and watch the money. And I was thinking, okay, I can't afford a singer, so I'm going to have to do it myself. And I suppose when I was young, I would have learned songs because I was learning the slow airs for the FLA, for the competition. So when I was going to do a slow air in the fiddle, I'd learn the song, so I'd have the phrasing right. And when I was under 12, I entered the singing all right. But I think I might have won a Kerry flack, when I was, 9 or something. But I, it's something, it's interesting. It's something I remember my granny doing. My granny, actually, who's from here. She would have left. She was just off Falls Road, I think, is it Logan Street, Logan Place?
Oh, wow.
They got burnt out when she was about 5.
Oh,
and back in the day, a story, I think, common enough. She ended up eventually down in Cork via Carlingford, but via either Glasgow or Liverpool. We're still trying to work out what weird route they took, but she ended up down in Cork. But she... joined the Conwy na Gaeilge branch down in Cork and learnt all the songs and would be constantly singing them around the house. So there's certain songs that I learnt as airs then because I associated them with Mamo, So I guess I kind of had grown up with it without realising. Now that's, every time I was visiting the grandparents, so that's what I remember,
And do you think also sometimes the songs are there, and if you've got a bit of a voice, it's there. But the value is equated sometimes with the instrumental music, and then maybe you don't. If you're an instrumentalist, that's more valuable than maybe being a singer.
I don't know. I think, ironically, from an audience point of view, I think the singing is more accessible.
Yeah.
For me as well, I think outside of Ireland, I discovered that, especially non-English speaking countries that were hugely interested in Irish traditional music, they completely got that you might be a musician who sings as opposed to a singer. And it was all about the passing on of the tradition and the story behind the tune and the fact that I was singing in Irish, which I predominantly do. So I think that was something that gave me a bit of confidence. And actually, ironically, when I started touring first, having come back from the big RD, when I released my first album, I got approached to join Carlos Nunez's band. And I ended up touring with him for 4 years. And it was really good because it kind of bought me a bit of time to get up and running under my own name. But he was brilliant at throwing me in the deep end. And he had me singing in Breton and in Galician and several languages, actually. When I think back at it, French, Breton, Galician, I think they were the main ones, and a little bit of Spanish.
All our Celtic cousins, all our Celtic languages.
Yeah, absolutely. A Brazilian, because I was on his Brazilian album, actually. And then when that toured, I needed to learn the Brazilian songs, you know. So, of course, the Brazilian language, you know, there's a big link between Galicia and Brazil, you know. So it was very, very...
So that throwing you in at the deep end, though, that in the moment, it can feel like you're drowning sometimes. I suppose when you come out the other side, you realise that you've learned an awful lot, and it shows you maybe what you're really made of.
I think so, and I think it was the same with Riverdance as well. I got kind of dropped in the deep end in terms of learning the music very quickly for, I think, one of the first gigs I did, and to be honest, Riverdance was my first professional job, which is fairly, you know, fairly up there. And I think what people mightn't realise, because there are so many dance shows out there now, people forget what it was like before Riverdance existed. And with Riverdance, I think what sets it apart from some of the copycat shows, and I don't mean that in a derogative manner.
It opened a door, it started something.
It started something, but the difference as well was that it was based around Bill Whelan's music. It wasn't a dance show, it was Bill Whelan using all his various influences to put the show together. The Riverdance segment that happened at the Eurovision, it included dancers, but it started with the choir. It was very much about the kind of music he was exploring, you know, the Eastern European influence and the Spanish influence, because he was doing a lot of Spanish fusion music, if you know what I mean, at the time. But it meant that the fiddle part of Riverdance, it's a bit of a roaster, I think. You know, any of the fiddlers that have done it will tell you that you need to have skill, not just at trad. There's a lot of kind of classical technique needed and a little bit of jazz, and then you're running around the stage, you need to have confidence. And so, like, that was my very first...
It's not just an element of performance, and I've only seen Riverdance recently. So I haven't seen it at its height, which you would have been involved still in the height years.
Absolutely. I think it was 2 years into it being in existence, because of course the 7-minute segment was 94. The full show came together in 95, and then I first stepped for Maureen Fahey in 97, February of 97, and then I became a full-time musician with them when they set up the Lagan troupe, as it was known. We became the Lagan, and that toured North America starting January 98.
My goodness.
So, you know, so it was, I was 12 at the time. I was not, but we won't do any of the maths.
What's life like on the road doing something like that? Because we've all been there. The perception is that it's glamorous and it's fantastic, but you don't see maybe the hard work that has to be done, and just how long the days are, and how relentless maybe the hamster wheel is. Fácan na gá inis ó Arahori and Fácréalta seo. A few words now from the sponsors of this podcast, Music at Maddens. Dunville's Irish whiskey, proudly connected to its past and enthusiastically embracing its future. The spirit of Belfast is back, and it's even better than ever. And I should tell you, Dunville's also sponsors Belfast Trad Fest as well. And this Irish whiskey story is one of fame, fortune, tragedy and revival. Does sound epic, doesn't it? Now restored to its rightful place amongst the world's best whiskies, Dunville's award-winning single malt and vintage blend Irish whiskies are synonymous with premium quality, exquisite taste and rich heritage. And for over 18s only, and please drink responsibly. Sláinte. This week's Music at Maddens is brought to you by Anzac Drinks, which is one of the last remaining family-owned businesses in the north, supplying a wide range of spirits and wines and beers and premium exclusive products, proudly supporting local brands and bringing them to bars and restaurants and off licenses, giving them the spotlight they truly deserve. Along with working in partnership with market-leading global brands, they're committed to personal service, competitive pricing and long-term customer relationships. Anzac Drinks are trusted by independent businesses across Northern Ireland for their reliability and expertise, and they are passionate about helping customers discover both retailer favourites and unique finds. Over 18s only, and please drink responsibly.
It's really interesting because for me as well, there was a stark difference between me touring with Riverdance and then me touring with my own band. So me touring with Riverdance, this was a company, this was a production, and we were all employees. And in the very early days, people couldn't get enough of Riverdance, and I think there was maybe 6 weeks off a year. So you'd go out in January, you'd come back in June, you'd have 3 weeks off, you'd get sick for the first week because adrenaline was keeping you going on the road.
And your body's teaching you a lesson.
Exactly, you'd go back out in July and home at Christmas. And what you did is you travelled on a Monday, you did a sound check on a Tuesday, show Tuesday night, Wednesday night, Thursday night, Friday night, 2 shows Saturday, 2 shows Sunday, and you travelled on a Monday. And if you were staying in a place for more than a week, your Monday was off. But otherwise, you were going full on. There was no such thing as weekends. And you were living with the people that you were working with. You were travelling with them. There was no, it was a bubble, which meant that you were a little bit excluded from what was happening everywhere else. But there was no getting away with the people you were around either, which luckily for us, I think it really was a lovely family. I mean, that sounds like cliche, but when I was touring first, there was like 111 of us on the road, counting the crew. It was big,
huge.
And that was after some reductions already at that point, because they realised, okay, there's sustainability in this. There's, this could go for longer than a few years. We need to plan this a little bit better logistically. So even with the reduction, you were talking about touring maybe 111 people altogether. But all of that said, you didn't have your own moments really to get away. You didn't have the switch off. I still find it hard to get used to the idea of a bank holiday or a weekend, and that's my work as an archivist, which I'm at now 9 years. But so that was Riverdance. It was full on, but you weren't dealing with any of the trying to get the gigs, or you weren't doing any of that.
The work was just there, and you were getting your pay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So then, when I was doing it with my own band, I was doing everything, and you'd reach out and you try and get on a few agents' rosters, but I think my timing was epically awful because it was just around the time of the recession, and a lot of rosters were full. They weren't taking any others, so I was doing a lot of it myself. So leading into a tour, I was already tired. I was already exhausted with the preparation that would go on. And then you'd be, driving around and navigating and dealing with sound engineers and doing all of that aspect as well as what you were doing yourself on stage. But it was my music, my arrangements, it was my name. So it was swings and roundabouts. There was a huge satisfaction in that, touring under your own name and getting to play the kind of tunes you want to do. I mean, I loved Bill Whelan's music, and it was a real challenge to play it. And there's certain favourites of mine that I still every now and then the fingers will start going, But I did over 3,000 shows, so it was good to start playing some other stuff,
But that's the thing, though, when you look back at something like that, when you're in it, you don't see all this stuff. You're not weighing it all up in the way you are now with the benefit of hindsight and time, and also an older person, looking back on the things you do in your youth. We all do that, and we jump into things, and you're in the moment. You're but you were you were involved in something that was the absolute zeitgeist of the 90s. So I can't imagine just how exciting that must have been when you were in it.
Yeah, it really was. And I think a year or two into it, we realised we were. This wasn't something that, I mean, yes, absolutely, in terms of looking back at some of the experiences, you're kind of going, God, I wish I knew at the time how special that was. But an overall understanding of it, absolutely, we knew. I mean, there were jokes comedians were making that referenced Riverdance. It was a word that got into the dictionary.
Yeah.
You know, it was in Shrek. You know, do you know what I mean? There were all of these kind of cultural references, and we were kind of going, oh my God, like that's us they're talking about, you know? So that was really special. And I think there was an Olympic skater that skated to one of the pieces in Riverdance. So it was funny where it would start coming up, and that's when you realised, oh yeah, I'm part of something.
And also
special.
you know, at that stage of your career, to have that exposure to international audiences and that exposure to touring, seeing how this can travel. Like, do you think that Riverdance opened the doors for the exploration of other types of music? Did it whet an appetite with audiences, you know, globally for a little bit more? And did that make things easier?
I think so. I think me personally as well, it did. Like, so, and this is not in the bio at all, but I didn't do music in university. I did engineering. I'm an electronic engineer. And I had started work as an electronic engineer.
That should be in the bio.
My bio would be way too long if I put everything in. If I had it. I had grown up with traditional Irish music, but I'd never considered it a career. And of course, when I was growing up, Riverdance hadn't existed. So I'd never considered it a career. I went off and did engineering. My mom was my physics teacher, so science is in the family. I grew up with that. But it was when I was working for an Irish software company in Boston, and all these Irish bands started coming through and stopping off in Boston in Tommy Louise's pub, The Burn. That's where I started kind of meeting a lot of musicians coming through, but also kind of going, God, yeah, I need to get back to the music. And so I made a decision, which was risky, but I felt, okay, I have my degree in my back pocket. I'm going to give this a go for a year or two to see how I get on. And I went back to Ireland and I did a course in Cork. It's a bit like the Ballyfermot course, but this one's down in Cork, Skulls, the Fánefa. Sinead Lohan did it actually. It's called Music Management and Sound. It's kind of a taster of everything you need to know about the music business. And in the middle of that, I got a call to audition for Riverdance. And what had happened is that the Danon had been passing through. Ringo was there, saw me playing in the session the night before, went back with my name to the Riverdance powers that be, going, you should look at her as a potential fiddle player. And I got the call, and I ended up getting called in to cover for Maureen, and that was that. And then, so I started touring full-time January of 98, and my parents got to come out finally, I think the summer the following year. But for about a year and a half, you know, they thought what I was doing was fantastic, but they had no concept of really how big a deal it was. And they thought, you know, this is great, you know, but when are you going back to the engineering? You know, this was in the back of their minds altogether. And they came out, I think it was Calgary they visited. And they came out, saw the show. And I'll never forget it because my father, he was always a very affectionate man. He'd always give us hugs at the train station when we arrived in. And, you know, he had no problem showing affection that kind of a way. But he came out and he didn't know what to do. He didn't go to, like, he didn't know whether to hug me or shake my hand or whatever. And I'll never forget it. Like, I was visually watching my father trying to get his head around what he'd just seen. And the very first question he was asking then, it wasn't, you know, when are you going back to the engineering? It's, when are you recording your first album? And that had completely switched. And that was because of Riverdance. It suddenly opened up these, you know, possibilities.
I saw the value in it.
Absolute value in it. And like, as I said earlier, had Riverdance existed when I was growing up,
who knows?
maybe I never would have gone into engineering because it would have been a possibility.
Very clearly then the music was just always in your heart, and there was something like you're mentioning there about the pub in Boston, and I've got this picture of you going in and you lighting up like a spark, the eyes sparkling at the thought of this, you know, chatting to these people, imagining what their lives must be like. And obviously you were missing something. There was something in you that just wasn't clicking. It wasn't right. Like, how important do you think it is in general, Niamh, to follow that gut instinct? You know, just to tune into that and do what your gut's telling you to do.
Yeah, I have no regrets that I took the risk, but I suppose what I would also, you know, admit to is the fact that I did have a safety net of having my degree. So it didn't feel as big a risk to me at the time. But certainly it was a decision. It was a conscious decision. I want to give this a go. I'm not loving the other. I had loved physics in secondary school, thanks to my mom. She was a fantastic teacher. She left teaching early, ironically, and went off and is a landscape artist in oil. She's been selling paintings since her late 50s. So yeah, the science and music and science and arts very much kind of linked there. But I think it was just, once I went into college, it wasn't about electronics, it was about engineering, and it really taught me a way of solving problems, but I didn't love it. And when I went to Boston, I made sure I brought the fiddle, and there was it was a Dublin software company that sent out maybe 5 people actually, from the Dublin office to the States, so that they'd have somebody on US hours. So it was a very small group of us going out. So I brought the fiddle with me, landed out, and somebody I knew from university who had been out there ahead of me, lovely box player from Ballinasloe called Noel Scott, or Nullig I always knew him as, gave him a phone call. I'm in Boston, I'm going to be here for a while. Are you still playing? I'm in, and he'd list out the pubs for every night of the week, and he used to play with Killian Vallely. So I ended up kind of sessioning with Nullig and Killian quite a lot in Boston at the time, and a lot of other musicians. There was a real music scene, very strong music scene. And as I said, lots of musicians coming through as well. So like Solace were only a year or two old, and they'd passed through a few times, and I think Nomos passed through. So all of these names. God, I'm aging myself now, but it was just a fantastic time.
But they were all the big bands. Like, that was the big band era. That's when it was all getting really sexy, Niamh. Like, let's call it what it was. Like, do you know, when you think back to all of that, and not just that, but the music that they were making was, there was something really exciting about it as well. Particularly Solace, what they were up to, and because it was based in the States.
Yeah, I think as well, the way you always say it about when you take a step away, and you look back at where you're from, you realise the richness of it. But I think there's another layer to it in Irish traditional music. Not so much now, but back in the 90s and the 80s, the musicians from our Irish diaspora didn't have the inhibitions that we had in Ireland. And I think some of those inhibitions were put on us. Like, I gave a talk at the Belfast Trad there about women in music, and one of the areas I talk about is compositions. And I remember it wasn't until I was touring abroad, touring in the States and in Canada and in Scotland even, that I was starting to see young bands playing their own tunes and proudly doing so and not seeing any issue with it. Whereas I had always felt, and I wasn't alone in this, that God, if I play my own tune, they'll be thinking, who does she think she is? You know what I mean? That there was much more of a kind of conservative slant within Ireland. And so that was part of it then. So when you're looking at the bands that were set up in the States, like Solace, there was a freedom, I think, that they had that I recognised, and I won't say envied, I appreciated, I think. And it made me kind of view it all a little bit differently, I think.
It showed you what you could be.
Yeah.
And you just needed to see that and understand that it was possible.
That's it, exactly, yeah, that's it, exactly.
We'll take a break, Niamh Ní Charra. This is fascinating. And we will hear a message now from our sponsors. Anisha Charge, a couple of focal for Urhori and Fod Crealta Shaw. A couple of words about our very kind sponsors. Rira Irish Lager. Nish, Rira, if you haven't heard about it, it kind of sums up the unpredictable devilment that Irish people are so very good at, particularly here in Maddens, in the heart of Belfast. So Rira celebrates the best bits of being Irish by creating reasons to talk, to meet, to gra, to bant, to hear, to be heard, to be lechéile, just that little more often. So music at Maddens, dig it and dig an tusa, agus anish, scúpla focal a charja for 18s and over. And please drink responsibly. Couple of focal anish fwy Urhori and Fod Crealta Shaw Music at Maddens. Music at Maddens is sponsored by McElroy Guitars. Perfectly balanced, superb craftsmanship, wonderful clarity and tone, a truly unique sound. It's only natural. to want one. McElroyGuitars.co.uk for more details. Niamh Ní Charra is the guest this week on Music at Maddens, and we've just covered how she is a qualified engineer, left engineering, and followed the dream of being a musician. But there's a big connection between mathematics and music.
There is.
Yeah,
it was a
isn't
running joke between myself and Eileen Ivers because she had honours maths. And I can't remember. It just became a conversation. Then we were going through the list of fiddlers, I think, specifically, and discovering this other life that we all had at one stage. Yeah, I think she had a master's in maths, I think.
Yeah, I know a couple who would agree with that.
Yeah,
most definitely,
yeah.
And I can see it's just the language of it, and it all just clicks into place.
Yeah,
most definitely. So we've spoken then about Riverdance and touring, getting the bug, seeing that being your own person, your own musician was possible for you, and here you are, numerous albums later. Sitting in front of me as an archivist as well.
Yes.
So you're a musician and an archivist.
Yeah.
But that sounds to me like a further extension of the music. Are they interlinked or complementary? How did you get into it?
I suppose before I talk about how I got into it, I think one of the things that I for a while, I was very quick to clarify is that, no, I'm a professional archivist. In other words, everybody would think if I said I'm an archivist, oh, you must work for it's a hobby, you're a collector, you must work for the Irish Traditional Music Archive. And by the way, anybody working for the Irish Traditional Music Archive is blessed. But I was always trying to separate it out and go, putting the music aside for a moment, this is my archive work, which is very different. Because it is a profession in its own right, and people mightn't realise it. And actually, the material that I'm working on, it's Mary Robinson's archive that I'm archiving at the moment. So, like a lot of human rights material and everything. And we'll get to that in a minute, I suppose. But what got me into it? One, it was I suppose, practicality. I had been touring for the guts of 20 years, and no pension. No weekends, body getting tired of touring, and mainly because I was doing so much besides the playing. The playing on stage was about 10% of what I was doing. And I was recognizing I will burn out and I will hate this if I keep going like this. I need to do something to protect that, if you know what I mean. And physically, it's tiring, when you're doing it full time.
It's a decision and a point that every musician must come to, or want to plan towards, or possibly should plan towards.
Yes, and I think that's the key. The trick is to make the decision early enough.
It's a conversation that's not happening, isn't it?
No, and I think it's interesting when you see some bands coming back on the road, having been gone for a while, and for various different reasons. But I think if you plan early enough, you can, I suppose, look as part of it too, but you create your own look. But I am very lucky that I have found this other career that I really, really like as well. My heart is in that as well. And they do complement each other. And one of the reasons I had considered archiving, I didn't want to go back and do another degree. I didn't want to start all over again. I didn't want to be somebody starting a career 10, 15, 20 years older than others in the same position. The archive world, your previous experience is a bonus. It's considered a really good thing to have. And it's interesting that quite a few archivists, it's very common for people to move into that world kind of mid-career. So that attracted me. But the real thing that attracted me, and I think anybody who has my albums, they'll know I write tomes. So any album you get from me, there would be lots of eating and drinking in the sleeve notes, if you know what I mean. That I put a lot of work in there, and it's what I appreciate in other albums as well.
And I appreciate that as well. Yeah,
you get plenty to read out on the radio programs. Definitely, it's all there.
It's fantastic.
Yeah,
but no, it's not even that. It puts things into context. It brings it alive in so many different ways. It opens the door to something perhaps you didn't realize existed. Then you go down the rabbit hole of that particular, stage in history, or this event, or this person.
Yeah.
They're so important, and I think it's so important to know where things come from as well and understand the context.
That's really it. And there's two parts of that. One is the passing on of the tradition, and the other is this idea of provenance. And that's where the archive world and the music world are very, very similar. You need to know the provenance of these records to show that they are authentic, that you can stand over them. That's a huge part of our work as archivists. In terms of me getting into archives, the real turning point, I suppose, was the Cuz album.
But did you just wake up one morning and say, I want to be an archivist?
Kinda.
Really?
Kinda.
How did it even be? How did it become a career that was on your radar?
Two reasons. One was that Cuz album and me doing so much research ahead of releasing it, and I'll chat about that in a minute. But Nicholas Carlin basically saying you could be on this side of the table, because he appreciated what I was doing in the research, the care I was taking to track things down. But also, I guess, and one of the reviews actually called me an archivist, and I got very embarrassed because I realised I'm being called something I actually haven't trained for, and I want to go and do that. But also, ironically, linking back to Riverdance, one of my best friends, Emer Murphy, if she's listening, she was a stage manager on Riverdance, but she works in the Abbey Theatre. She's the prop master there. She introduced me to the Abbey's archivist, Mairead Delaney. And I was in between tours. It was kind of the Christmas lull, and archives are always under-resourced. And Mairead suggested, if you're interested, come in and do a little bit of work experience. So I did. This was quite a while ago, maybe 2 years before I did the course. So I did some work experience there for a while, just to get a bit of a taster. And Mairead was saying, so have I put you off it? And I went, nope, love this. This is great. So I think working with Mairead really, really helped. But I think it was actually Nicholas Carlin and then the review afterwards of the Cuz album that kind of planted the seed firmly in my head. So
well, when you get a recommendation like that, I'm sure you.
That's it, and I think
it lands, doesn't it?
It does, and I think so. That Cuz album, I suppose, I need to give a bit of a background. That's album number 3, of my solo albums. Yeah, so Cuz Tehan came from Cordial, just outside Castle Island, right in the thick of Sliabh Luachra country, and he immigrated to Chicago in his 20s. And he's a name synonymous with Sliabh Luachra music. He was taught by Padraig O'Keeffe. He composed loads of tunes himself. And what I think was his last visit home, but certainly one of the last, he was brought to a show put on for tourists in Killarney, which is any musician who's reared in Killarney, they earn their pocket money playing for the tourists. And sure enough, that's what I was doing at the time when I was like knee high to a grasshopper. I was maybe 9 or 10, I think. He saw me playing fiddle and concertina specifically, which he was really taken with. And he went back to Chicago and he sat in his kitchen and recorded a full hour of music. And he talked to me on to the cassette recorder as if I was sitting opposite him. And it's a tape I absolutely treasure and still have. And that was something that was in the back of my mind as a musician, that I wanted to return to that tape and do a tribute album to him. But I didn't want it to be my first album because I wanted to have good experience under my belt. But also, if I was going to do a tribute for him, I needed to have some bit of a name myself so that I could spread the word and also get some great guests on the album. So I did a lot of work for that album, tracking down tunes. Because it was really funny. He was there sitting at that table and talking to me, and he'd be telling me, this is a tune I wrote and no one knows I wrote it. And then he'd talk about another one. This is a tune I wrote. This is a tune everyone thinks I wrote. I didn't write it at all. It's too hard.
Had you spoken to him at all, or
I was introduced to him. I'd say I had about 10 words.
But he saw something in you.
He did. He was really taken with me, and he made 2 predictions at the time. He said, music is going to be a big part of your life, and you'll win in All Ireland. And I ended up winning the All Ireland and the concertina, I think, the following year. But I think one of the reasons he was taken with me was that I stood out on that stage because I was very young, and everyone else I was playing with 6 17-year-olds, 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds, that kind of age group.
And that does make a difference.
It does
at
make
that
a
age,
difference.
yeah.
But the other thing was the combination of fiddle and concertina, because he'd grown up seeing that as the combination in his area. And every time he was coming back, you know, visiting, that was getting rarer and rarer. And certainly when I grew up, it was all box. Like I was surrounded by box players. So that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah, and when you think Sleeve Lucre, you think box as well. Yeah. It's synonymous with it.
So I took great care to make sure that all the tracks I had in the album were definitely his and had the right name, which in some cases wasn't possible because he himself couldn't remember, or he'd give a tune a few different names, or he'd give a tune a name thinking it was his and then afterwards second guess himself. So, you know, you couldn't depend on him all the time either. But it was in the middle of researching that in the Irish Traditional Music Archive that Nicholas was asking me what I was up to. And it kind of went from there. Like he actually launched it for me in the Cobblestone, and I donated a copy of the tape that Cos made for me. I donated that to the archive.
So it's all there. You can see it all coming. You can see
the path now. It makes sense by the time.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And even like when I went in to do the first album with Tony O'Flaherty down in Killarney, I brought the tape in with me at the time and said, any chance you could digitise this? Because I'm afraid it won't play. Now, you talk to any archivist now, they'll be telling you, make sure if you've anything that's you know, like cassettes or VHS, get them digitized fast,
now,
you know, digital preservation. Little did I know that I was thinking that, you know, that is one of the talents of it.
So you had the brain, you had the foresight. This was just meant to be.
I think it was written on the wall.
It was, and that brings us then, like honestly, we could sit here now that we've got the snug, like just order the pints, we'll sit here all night. But tell me about the work on the Mary Robinson archive, I was going to say UCG, National University of Ireland, Galway. It's back to University of Galway now,
yes,
isn't it?
But it's no college, so it's University of Galway.
Yeah, it's my alma mater.
University of Galway. Yeah, I wouldn't exist without that place because my mum and dad met there doing science. They both did the science degree together. Yeah.
Oh wow!
And I've a lovely photograph of mum and dad, and both sets of parents at their graduation because they graduated. They were in the same class. And I'd say that's very rare when you think about women doing science degrees as well, you know. So yeah, that's where I'm working, and I'm working on Mary Robinson's archive, which is the biggest archive in the university. It's about 700 boxes of material. It covers everything. It's not just her presidency, but it's the 20 years before that when she worked as a lawyer and like precedent-setting cases in Ireland. Mm-hmm. So actually, the bit that I have catalogued that's released currently is all of her legal cases, material relating to all of her legal cases and her presidential term. She was our first female president. Hard to believe we've only had two since her. It's 28 years since she... 28 years since she finished, 35 years this December since her inauguration.
Yeah, 1990.
And we've only had two since then because, of course, it's two blocks of 14. She completely transformed that presidency, partly because she was a constitutional lawyer, so she understood what could and couldn't be done. But in a lovely arc, she ends up as president signing bills into existence that improved the civil rights of Irish people that had come directly from cases she herself had been working on as a barrister. For example, she was the legal, you know, the senior counsel that brought Ireland to the European Court on behalf of David Norris. And then as president, she signs in the bill that decriminalises homosexuality. That's just one example, you know. Ireland is a very different place now because of her work, and not just the presidency. And people know about her presidency, although they forget just how much was done by her. But they don't realise just how much she had already done at that point.
And how brave she'd been as well.
How brave she'd been. She got excommunicated from the pulpit in her hometown in Ballina. Her parents were literally in the church in Ballina listening to priests, you know, giving out stink. And this was because she was fighting to have contraception the contraception ban lifted. She got a lot of hate mail, like really, really bad hate mail. They burnt a lot of it initially, and it's something they regret. They didn't burn subsequent hate mail, which is great because we now have it in the archive.
What's it like to go through? Like, are you going through those letters, those correspondences, and reading them? And I know you've got a very mathematical mind looking at it, but you know you can't help but be emotionally attached to what you're reading as well.
You can't help it. I mean, you're also, I suppose, seeing some of this material for the first time since she read it, for example. And what you're doing is you're obviously preserving for the future and you're cataloguing it, but you're also considering, okay, how much of this can I open? Do I need to close it for now, but it opens in 20 years? Do I need to open it in 75 years after people have died? I'm balancing this whole...
Do you make those decisions?
As archivists, we're trained to make a lot of those decisions, but at the same time, I would always have somebody to bounce off and check. And Mary herself has been a fantastic donor in the sense that she's very much warts and all. She absolutely values the power of people being able to see
authenticity and integrity
and
there.
not, you know, she doesn't want to have the story told. She wants all the story told. Now, obviously, there would be GDPR issues. There would be legislation that I'd have to adhere to, all of that. But there is an element of balancing the good for society of this material being available versus the individual's rights. If that
it's like the journalistic code, really, you're making that decision.
It's very similar. And, you know, you also have this thing where, okay, well, that person wasn't working in a private capacity. They were working on behalf of a company or a political party or whatever it may be. And therefore, they're fair game. And that it would be understood that they would be fair game, you know. And so in other cases, what you're doing is actually showing what they went through, and you're giving them a voice to go, look, see, this is what I was dealing with.
It's a moment.
Do you know what I mean?
It is. It's a moment in time, isn't it?
It really is. Yeah,
and we quickly forget what happened yesterday, 5 years ago, even 35 years ago, 1990, when Mary Robinson was inaugurated as president, our first female president. And like, you're looking at what I find fascinating about that whole presidential material. It includes the presidential election. So you're seeing all of the articles in the press and the way, the language used even. How interesting is that now when we're in the middle of, we'll be leading up to a presidential campaign. Yeah. That must be just fascinating.
It really is. And it's what I love about the University of Galway in terms of our archives is that is the value placed on them as an asset for the university. So, for example, all of those legal cases I was talking to you about and the correspondence attached and all of that material is embedded in the first year course for the law students. In fact, it's a big part of what we do is we have academic champions in the various schools across the university that will champion an archive and will work to ensure that the students come into the archives and get used to dealing with primary sources, but are also learning about all of this. So you've law students, first year law students that were looking at this material and realising, oh my God, this is what our parents had to deal with or our grandparents had to deal with back in the day. And that's really important because it makes it a lot more real when you're reading somebody's letter. Or you're reading, letters from politicians to each other, or you're reading, some of those letters were written to the newspapers. And it's just, there's a lot of, like, you'll get a lot of correspondence that are both sides. So you'll have people writing in and going, thank you for doing this. I have felt so much on my own until you took up this cause. And, there's a lot of that in there.
And then there's a lot on the other side too. Oh, Niamh, that's just fascinating work. And I can see then I'm getting an insight into how your brain works.
That's a very scary thought, Annette.
No, it's fabulous because it makes so much sense then from reading your fabulous sleeve notes, the way you've approached albums, the concept you've brought in. It all matters to you very much, and it all makes a lot of sense, to be honest with you. And you can see the amount of work that you've put in. We've run out of time, but I did want to just ask you very briefly before you go about fair play, because you were one of the founding members of this volunteer movement, which a group of women got together a number of years ago and thought, we need to address gender equality within traditional music.
Yeah.
And, you know, I know that you're not fully active at the minute, but there's still work going on and still a lot of work to be done. How do you reflect on the foundation of fair play and what it's achieved?
That's not a simple, short question, is
I
it?
know
How
it's
much time
not.
do we have left?
I know it's not.
Look, I think every generation has its moment, I guess. And the thing about any movement like this, whether it's women in traditional music or any other kind of civil, you know, groundswell of a campaign, is that it doesn't last by itself indefinitely. It has its moment, but then the baton has to be passed and the next crowd come in. So that's very much part of it. We're very surprised we're still here and in existence, and we still do a lot of posting on social media, but we've had some very concrete results as well because of the lobbying that we've done. I've given a talk at the Belfast Trad Fest for the second time by special request. I do this talk, 100 years of women in Irish traditional music, which is a whole conversation by itself, but a big part of that is showing people the kind of obstacles that women faced it historically and how much is still there and how much you need to kind of drill down. So on paper you might have a lovely, perfectly balanced program, but then you look at it and you realize the women are all in duos or soloists, or they're a Wednesday afternoon lunchtime slot versus the big gig and the big venue on a Saturday that the press are going to go to, and the audience who are coming, who trust the festival to educate them on the music they need to be listening to, they're going to the Saturday shows. That is still a very big problem. Mm. I also think you have a situation where, like earlier this year, there was a festival that posted their program and there was no woman on the program at all. But it wasn't just that. The men in the program were, I'd say there was a maximum of 10 years between the eldest and the youngest. It was a very, very narrow view. And you knew that was because whatever the committee were doing, they were looking at a very small section of what is a very big scene. Mm-hmm. And if you're encouraging, through encouraging gender balance, if you're encouraging people to take a little bit more care in how they program, they're casting their net wider and further. A lot of ships get brought up in those same tides, you know. So I think that is something that can't be stressed enough. Mm-hmm. I think lived experience is a funny thing, and I think for a lot of people who are privileged in our tradition, they really have a blind spot to that privilege, and I think unfortunately that's still the case. I think we have quite a few allies. I think some of the allies feel it's not their place to speak out, that it's, you know, they don't want to speak on our behalf, but actually it's the same in any civil movement. It's the allies that will get everything across the line, and I think we need more of our allies to step up and speak out.
Do you feel that being involved in fair play has given you a bit more confidence in yourself, your ability, or maybe it's just come at the right time in your life as well, though, that you were getting there anyway, Niamh?
I think, ironically, I had kind of pulled back from the music. So if this had existed 20 years ago, I think it would have been a real benefit to me then, because I wouldn't have felt so isolated in a way. The irony of it, the wonderful irony of it for me, is that I have got to know an awful lot of female musicians. The awful thing is that it took me being part of Fair Play to do that, because I never met them on the road, because I was always the only musician that was female that was on a programme at a particular festival on a particular day, especially when you look at instrumentalists. Mm-hmm. You very often had, you know, it's the token female
singer.
Tick, or you'd have singers, but even then you wouldn't have that many. I was very regularly the only person in my own dressing room, and then all the crack was in the other dressing room. And the problem with that is the dressing rooms and the sound check stages and the festival clubs, they're the golf courses of the music world. That's where future projects and collaborations get talked about. So it perpetuates the problem, I think, you know. But it is wonderful, and actually for me here as well, excuse me, I think there's an element where having so much under my belt now, there's a little bit of a devil may care. I'm not afraid to say this now, but I also have the safety net of another career. I'm not relying on this full time. There's plenty of women that would love to be able to say stuff and don't, because they'll get blacklisted, or they'll feel they just won't get booked, or, you know, they're not in a position to.
Yeah, and that unfortunately is the reality that a lot of people just don't see. But thank you to you and all your fellow Fair Play members for doing your bit and continuing to highlight the inequalities, because it has made a difference, and you can see confidence in younger women coming up through the ranks as well, and I think that's a great thing to see.
It's a fantastic thing to see. I think within the tradition itself, there are a lot more women that are visible and strong and you know, ambitious, which I think is fantastic. I think the area I still worry about is how many of those go to become professional musicians, because it's very similar to sport. Things fall off, you know. You see them in the competitions, you see them as teenagers in the clubs, you know, going to the Gar or the Camogie or whatever. It's very similar with the trad, and then as soon as they're off to have a professional career, it's not considered as a potential career for them, or even as something to study in university.
Yeah. But hopefully now that will hopefully change, and a lot of work's being done to make that happen. Niamh, great to chat to you.
Listen,
Thanks
lovely as
so
always.
much for joining us on Music at Maddens.
Not at all, and lovely to be here in all of this wonderful space.
Silence, except for the bells of the Angelus.
How bad. I'm sure there'll be plenty of tunes later now, so it'll be all good.